I got busted by TSA recently. It's true. I got busted for trying to bring in too much toothpaste through security. Common travel items must comply with the 311 liquids rule that includes toothpaste, shampoo, conditioner, mouthwash, and lotion. In other words, all of my toiletries have to fit in a gallon-sized bag, and the bottles can't be more than 3.4 ounces. That's the rule. I respect that. My toothpaste, I think, was maybe 5 ounces. So I asked the agent out of curiosity, after she took away my toothpaste, I said, I'm not allowed to have a 5-ounce bottle of toothpaste, but I could have as many 3.4-ounce bottles as I want, as long as they fit into a gallon bag. And she said, that is true. So I said, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. I could bring in 10 3-ounce bottles of toothpaste. That's 30 ounces of toothpaste, but I can't bring in one 4-ounce bottle. And she said, that is correct. So I just smiled and said thank you. And then what did I do? I got myself a cup of Auntie Anne's cinnamon pretzel nuggets. Made me forget all about my bottle of toothpaste. So good.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Podfulness. Let's get started.
Hey everyone. Just wrapped up an interview with Karla Hawley, which you're about to hear, where we talked about her favorite podcast called Modern Love. And if you're not familiar with the podcast, you may have heard of the TV show. It's an anthology series on Amazon, which has a bunch of different celebrities making cameo appearances for one episode. It talks about all the different versions of love. And the TV show is a little bit lighter. The podcast, after talking with Karla, it's a heavy lift emotionally, because love comes in all shapes and sizes and forms, and sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it's easy and beautiful, and sometimes it isn't a happy ending. Modern Love is the kind of podcast that leads you to some introspection. Anyway, here is my interview with Karla, talking about one of her favorite podcasts. Let's get to it. Karla Hawley, you are from Washington. You're from Mountain Home, Idaho. You're from Riverton, Wyoming. You're from Champaign, Illinois. You're from Laramie, Wyoming. You're from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You're from Washington, D.C. You're from Missoula, Montana. From Mare Island, California. And La Quinta, California. You're from all of these places. What's it like being able to say that you've lived in all of these wonderful places in the country?
Until I wrote this list out for you, I had not considered that at all. I didn't feel like one of those people who has lived all over the place, but turns out I have.
Yeah, you have. And you were raised mainly in Wyoming, though, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Wyoming. That's what I say. That's where I went to school from third grade through high school. And then I started a journey all over the place, mainly connected to husbands and jobs, of course. But then my career took several different paths, and that's why we ended up on the East Coast, which is where, I got a whole new perspective of the world from living there.
There's so much intrigue to me about living in Wyoming and Montana, that whole area, because on TV, we're used to seeing urban settings, right? We're used to seeing suburban settings. We just don't know a lot about the West. So what is it like growing up? What was it like for you growing up in Wyoming?
Well, the magic was just the small town atmosphere. Both of us my husband and I both grew up in towns of about 10,000 people in Wyoming. So you're very close to the mountains, the Tetons in our case, the Wind Rivers in our case. And just understanding the magic of that visual, of being so close to that natural phenomena of those gorgeous mountains. And my dad was a big fisherman. He didn't hunt, but we often spent our entire weekends just making forts out in the woods and running around on the trails and looking at the river and wading and looking at rocks. And my house now has rocks everywhere in it. And I think that's why, because it's It's just that natural environment. And, people want to be there. They want to go there. They want to experience it. And it's tricky with people in Wyoming. They don't necessarily want all kind of influx of people coming in to live
Not a lot of
there.
outsiders.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
That's not very good for them. They don't think, and so yeah, it's when we go to visit, which is often. My brother has a home in Jackson, and it's so wonderful. It's like my seriously happiest place because his window looks onto the Tetons.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like so spoiled, and it's a soul place for me.
So how often did you have wildlife, wild critters, large critters coming onto your yard?
So never.
Okay, good.
In those small towns, it was not high elevation where we lived. Probably there were deer around, maybe antelope.
Okay.
And you don't drive very far out of town to start spotting them in those places. But
Sure.
yeah, it's everywhere. It's pretty cool.
And Karla, your love of the outdoors took you to a position with the U.S. Forest Service, right?
Not really. I was a paralegal. I worked in law firms for a lot of years, and my brother-in-law was my sister's husband in Cheyenne was the head of job service in Wyoming. And one night he harangued me so long about applying for this job with the Forest Service. I had finally gave up and said, okay, I'll do it. I'll apply. I applied and I got the job and I went to work for the Forest Service. That's what happened.
Oh,
But
wow.
after I started, the mission became everything to me, caring for the land and serving people. So, yeah, I mean.
And where were you located when you worked for the Forest Service?
Laramie. I started in Laramie. Then I got transferred to Milwaukee, and then I got transferred to the Washington office.
What has changed in the way that we treat our national resources and our parks compared to back when you started and now? Or is there a difference?
I'm not an expert on this.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the environmental movement or the environmentalists were a lot more radical about their approaches when I first started. It was a big deal, and we were not as adept as we are now as an agency with cooperating and collaborating. Much, much, much better and smarter now. Okay. And we all have to be, because climate change has accelerated so intensely that there are no options. We have to work together.
Right.
So I feel like we're not enemies anymore. People back then may have felt more animosity toward those groups within the agency, but not now. People have to work together, and they should, and it's the right thing to do, and they're doing it.
Sure. And you use your experience with nature to sort of inform your artwork now, right? Because you're a painter.
Thank you for saying that. I am
sure.
a painter. It took me a long time to say I am a painter.
Mm-hmm.
I found I don't want to paint anything else. I don't go out and look at something and paint it. I paint from my experience.
Okay, so you don't need to be in front of the object. It's all in your head. You can see it.
Or I make it up. Yeah, it's living there, but I decide what to do with it.
Yeah. Right. So what else do you do in your free time? What other hobbies do you have? What's your favorite thing to do?
Play hoops in the garage with my grandson, AJ.
Aha. Do you take it easy on him? Do you back him down into the paint and dunk over him, or are you a little bit more gentle?
His latest line was, "Oh my God, you're terrible."
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, no filters there. So true. Grandpa, my husband Dan, plays with him mostly, and he really likes playing inside. He's on the autism spectrum. I think that AJ feels comforted by having walls around him.
Okay.
And we play outside too. We have a hoop that we can take out. And we don't just play basketball.
Right.
We also paint. That's one of my favorite things to do, is paint and do art with AJ. And it's a good outlet for him. He works really hard when he sketches, and it teaches me, because I think, oh, I could spend a little more time working on this or that.
Mm-hmm.
He makes me look at things in a different way when we're creating. He also thinks he's my art agent. I mean,
He's always hawking your stuff to people. He's trying to sell it on the streets.
He's always telling me how to market. He's 10, but when I sell a painting, his first question is, what was your total? I usually give him a little cut.
Oh, you do?
Well, he's my agent, He's very disappointed in me that I didn't go after Black Friday this last year. Like, Grandma, you need to work harder on the marketing piece.
And you say he's 10.
He's 10.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's right. Got to have a good marketer behind you.
Oh,
so
my
now,
God.
if your grandson were to ask you, what is the secret to being happy? What would you tell him?
Ooh, I'd say wake up with a positive attitude and fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my things. I mean, if I've been so distraught over the situation in the world, and especially our country, that I had moments the last few years where I didn't feel like my normal happy self.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just decided, okay, let's paint pictures. I mean, that was just a conscious during COVID. I'm going to just paint. I don't know how. I didn't know why. I'd never had done it before. And so I
Sounds like therapy a little bit, right? Like that was your therapy?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolute therapy. Yeah. But I would tell him, like you teach us, don't take it personally and just stay high. But you have to do it. You can't just think it. You have to do it.
So how would you define love as we transition into this podcast that you love to listen to?
Oh, such a great question. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if that's important to have an answer to that. We know it when we see it. We know it when we feel it. We give it. And I feel like if you give that feeling to someone so unconsciously and so subconsciously and so freely, that's it. You know, right?
That similar feeling, it comes across in the podcast that we're going to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
Modern Love. So we are going to get to that right after this short break.
Podfulness.
Cell phones. We are living in an era where phones are a necessity, not a luxury. It seems as adults we can't live without them, but what about our children? How young is too young to have a cell phone? Do you buy one for your child once he or she becomes a teenager? When they start middle school? It's a tough decision, but here's the really difficult question we must ask ourselves. Why do we even call it a phone? When was the last time you saw someone under the age of 25 talking on their smartphone? What happened to the phone part? Why smartphones even have the phone feature is beyond me. So parents, the next time your child asks for a cell phone, give them an actual cell phone. No data plan, no apps, just an old school flip phone that allows you to make and receive calls. They wanted a phone and you delivered. Parent of the Year award, you got that locked up. And now, back to the show. I started watching Modern Love, the TV show, right? I can't remember if it was on Apple or Amazon or wherever. But then it wasn't until you wrote to me that I learned that it was a podcast first.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you knew about this podcast for a while, right?
I knew about it for years. My niece, who lives in London, randomly said one day after I retired, "You might like this podcast, Modern Love." And I tried it. It was my first podcast. It's my favorite podcast. I'm not a huge podcast listener, but it's kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, well, sometimes it just takes one or two podcasts, and that's enough to fill your queue and to make you feel
Mhm.
good. So what is it about the show that you like so much? Tell me about the format and
Yeah.
how it works.
They say it's about love, loss, and redemption. And Megan Chakrabarty, gotta love that name.
Yes.
She's kind of the host person, and she often introduces it. Um, it's it's written by real people, humans who are out there in the world who want to tell their story. I like that. I think we all want to tell our stories. We don't know how and we don't know when or why, but when we get a chance like this morning, I think that feels good. That feeds our soul to say to you something about my life. And so these are little stories that people have written, and each one of them has just touched me. It's love in all different kind of ways, like you got from the TV show, all kind of different scenarios about it.
That was my hesitation in watching the show at first because I didn't want to watch a show where every week you learned about a different love story. I assumed it was between a man and a woman, or two men
Mm,
or two women. It was just falling in love. It's really about encompassing all of what love is, about love for family, about love for your children,
yeah,
about, sexual attraction as well. But
yeah.
what were some of the episodes that you listened to that really struck a chord with you?
So I thought about that because I assumed you were going to ask me that question. So this is the synchronicity in the world. The one I picked from my original listening, probably in 2017 or so, was about this father writing about his autistic son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was writing about how he forged this path around their home and walked it and walked it and walked. That was his comfort place. He made this. It's called The Boy Who Makes Waves, and he used this, had this belt, and it was like he was recreating the ocean for himself. But the story was about the father and the mother and being a team for this kid. And there's just so many ways that resonated with me with AJ. AJ is highly verbal, and Michael was not highly verbal, not verbal. And so lots of differences. They say, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. They're very, very different. So that just was about a deep, difficult uh, grief of a father writing about a son he couldn't love in a regular kind of way.
Yeah.
And then I listened to one that was about this woman who dropped her sweet potato at Whole Foods, and this like dreamy British tall handsome man picked it up, and they went from there. It was this idealized love she was after, and she kept looking for him, and she hung out way too much at Whole Foods and the whole thing. So it's just about
Oh, so wait a
seeking.
minute. So sweet potato, an actual sweet potato, that wasn't like her nickname for her dog or
No,
her
she
child.
dropped her sweet potato and he picked it up.
And then he disappeared.
And there was a whole story about that was so poignant and so beautifully written that I just was reminded how cool the podcast is.
So was she just creating this fantasy in her head?
Yeah, because he talked to her for a long time and he was so handsome, and because she'd had a tarot reading that said she was going to meet him, and it didn't happen. So, but she became open to the idea of inviting that kind of love into her life.
I see. And so
Yes.
does Megan, the host of the show, is she the one telling the story, reading people's stories, or do we hear the voice of the
So
people?
this is something that I used to love about the podcast, and I'm a little less in love with it now that I listened more lately. Um, they introduce it, Megan, generally, and then they have some kind of celebrity. Most of them, I don't know who they are, but they are described as a celebrity. Read, because they have beautiful voices and they do a nice job acting the part. And then they interview the actual writer. And then they usually do a little follow-up with that person. Little, like, where are you now kind of thing, which is cool. It's cool. This one I listened to was this guy whose grandma got married for the third time. And he had broken up with his long-term girlfriend. And it was about him reflecting, how can grandma find this love 3 times, get married, and what am I doing wrong kind of thing. It's just a beautiful story, because grandma, then they interviewed her at the end of the podcast, which was very cool.
Right.
And she was like, look, love is different when you get my age. Love is more about comfort, more about caring for each other. It's not exciting, it's comfortable.
Yeah.
And so that it was such a beautiful message. And to have her just there chatting away, you know, that's cool. That I do like that part of the podcast. I like the actual person. So what I'm saying is, I think they could do away with this celebrity nonsense and just have the guy who wrote it or the woman who wrote it do the reading. It might make it more personal, but I like their format. I think it's good. I was comparing it to your format with this podcast and how it's fun to have just casual conversation. I could read those essays, right? But the way we're doing this podcast, I think you've struck a good format here.
Oh, thank you, Karla.
It feels very friendly to me.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
With Megan and Modern Love, was there follow-up on Michael, the boy with autism?
Yes.
And that family?
Yeah. So when he went through puberty, he became fairly violent and had a lot of issues and was more difficult to love, right? It's hard. They picked up and moved to the ocean so that he could actually feel the ocean and feel the waves. And it didn't work. So it's about continuing to love that person no matter what. Absolutely 100%, every way you can, no matter when it doesn't work well.
Wow, that's fascinating way to look at that, because some of the episodes I listened to, the one that struck the chord with me was the one about Asian family, and the daughter was caring for the grandfather who had early Alzheimer's. It was the early stages, and I'm dealing with that as well. And it was about a family caring for our elders, and it was about commitment, it was about sacrifice, and how it's really hard to care for a person who is, having that dementia. And there's a sweetness to the story, there's empathy there. I think that Megan, the host, does a really good job with that.
Good, agree.
But it's hard to me to listen to a show every week that's so emotional and deeply moving. So how do you deal with that? How do you balance that?
I might come at it from a different place because of some really intense family trauma, some deep trauma that has caused me to look at end of life and death probably differently than a lot of people do. I am very sort of matter of fact about death. And I've examined that for 25 years. Why? This last week, I lost an aunt on my dad's side and I lost an uncle on my mom's side. They both died after long illnesses. And I find myself being very I believe they're in a better place because they're free of pain, and I may not be as even outwardly emotional as the rest of my family. And so I that's just an observation. but I think I bring that to modern love. Like when I'm listening, I'm feeling like I get that. I know how she feels. I understand why she's grieving. I get it. It's more like an understanding, a deep understanding.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of lighter podcasts out there.
Yeah.
And this one,
Thank you.
but this one, sometimes you just want to be able to hear stories that are real and not necessarily happy endings every time, right?
For sure.
Working on it, but like you said, wake up every morning with a good attitude and fake it till you make it, and
go for it.
yeah.
And there's a bit of there's audacity in using the word love in your podcast title, don't you think?
Sure.
I mean, love. People are like, what? But that is what we need. So every story you listen to is going to add to your experience in the world in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, and it makes you feel like you're not alone, right? In your own challenges and troubles.
Absolutely.
Well, Karla, oh, this is heavy. We're going to change gears, okay? I think we need to have a little fun and game before we end this podcast, okay? So.
This is the part that made me the most nervous.
Oh, this is good. All right. You need to feel a little nervous in this world. So, Karla with a K, you've lived in many different places. The list is impressive. I've called home essentially one place for my entire life, with the exception of 3 years after college. But you are a different story. So I counted 8 states, 7 technically, and DC is, for our purposes, we're going to call DC a state. So I want to know how much attention you were paying to each state when you lived there. So I'm going to ask you a question about each state, and it's a question that residents of that state are more likely to know than non-residents. So, are you ready to begin? This game is called State of Mind.
Podfulness.
8 questions. 8 questions, 3 points for every correct answer, 11 points for incorrect answers, 5 points for answers that are better than the actual answers, and you only need to get 2 answers correct to be the grand prize winner, okay?
Sweet.
You love my scoring system?
Let's do it.
It makes a lot of sense. All right, so here we go. The state of Washington. Washington lays claim to an obscure World's Fair record. In 1974, the World's Fair took place in the smallest city to ever host the momentous occasion. What city was it?
Olympia.
Olympia is a very good guess, but incorrect. It was Spokane.
No way.
At the time, it was 170,000 people living there, and they had 5.2 million visitors in 1974.
I should have known that. I have 14 cousins and aunts and uncles who live in Spokane.
Well, you'll have to ask them if they attended the World's Fair.
What I'm going to do is not have them listen to this podcast.
Okay. Well, here's your chance to redeem yourself, because we're moving to Idaho now.
Oh, boy.
The state's motto is Esto Perpetua. What does that mean?
Esto. I used to be a radiology transcriptionist. I should know what esto means. Potatoes
Esto?
Forever.
Potatoes forever is close.
Forever.
You know what? This is forever, is what that means.
Okay.
This is forever.
I think I should get half credit for that.
I think you should get full credit, because this is forever is a silly little statement. So we're giving you 1 full point there, or 3, or I don't remember the scoring, but you're 1 for 2. Here we go. Wyoming was the first state to have the first female what in 1925?
1925. Well, voter.
Oh, I see what you. That's a good guess.
It's
has something to do with
equality state. It wasn't governor.
It was governor.
It was?
Yes. The wife of Governor William Bradford Ross became the first governor after he died. Nellie Taylor Ross was her name. So she served for 2 years. She was the 14th governor of the state, and she's been the only governor in Wyoming's history so far.
I'm going to get in trouble for that one. So. Okay. Edit.
Okay, I'm not going to edit this out. Illinois. In the United States, Illinois is the largest producer of what? Bratwurst, pumpkins, craft beer, or piñatas?
How long did it take you to come up with those
It took a while.
items? I'm going with pumpkins.
Pumpkins is correct. Hard to
'Cause
believe.
it's
Nicely
not
done.
those
You're
other
back.
things.
Illinois is the pumpkin capital. Here we go. Wisconsin. You lived in Wisconsin. The highest point in Wisconsin is found at Timms Hill, which is in Price County. Guessing within 1,000 feet, what is the elevation of Timms Hill?
Well, so I'm gonna guess something like Wisconsin, 4,800 feet. 4,800 feet.
4,800 feet. That is aggressive. Believe it or not, 1,951 feet.
They think they have mountains. They're not. Yeah.
They are not. Oh, no, not with those numbers. No. That's another miss for you, Karla. Here we go. We are now in Washington, D.C.
I was busy working, not studying my place.
Right. I was not studying elevation. I get it. Here we go. Only one president is buried in Washington, D.C. Who is it?
Been there. JFK?
JFK is incorrect. The only president.
JFK's in Boston.
He was laid to rest at Washington National Cathedral. Woodrow Wilson.
Why?
Because he had no friends.
I mean, really, they just didn't want to go far.
Right. It was a hard time back then. They just he died in D.C. Let's just keep him here. Oh, that's awful. I apologize for that.
That's terrible. Me too.
All right, Montana. It's the only state in the lower 48 where you can find this large, hairy mammal.
Sasquatch?
The only state in the lower 48 where you can find this large, hairy mammal. Now, it's estimated that there are 60,000 of these animals in North America, but the majority of them are in Alaska and Canada.
It's a reindeer?
No, a grizzly bear.
I was going to say grizzly bear, but there are grizzly bears in Wyoming, I think.
Well, according to my information, which is from the internet, so we know that it's accurate.
Has to be.
Yes, right. There are about 1,000 in the lower 48. All of them are in Montana. Maybe you saw them when they were taking a break. They were on a little side trip and they wanted to see Yellowstone. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. You don't know. There are lots of bears in Wyoming and there are lots of bears around Yellowstone, but I should have got that right.
And here we go, Karla. Here's redemption. Okay.
Thank God.
California. California has watermelon snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Can you describe watermelon snow?
No, that's a stupid term. I got nothing on watermelon snow, and I've never even heard that expression.
I never had either, but apparently when the snow builds up on the mountains in the summer, it looks pink and reddish. And if you step in the snow and get it on your clothes, it might stain them. Some people even report smelling watermelon when they're in the snow.
See, this is the thing that gives California people a weird reputation.
Right. I know, like just another weird thing to associate with California.
Yeah.
Do you think that California, when you think about the whole country, do the weirdest things in the country happen in California or Florida?
I know. Good one. We can go Florida, Texas, Idaho even. No. Not
the
California.
more people, probably the higher the chances that something weird is going to happen.
It is, but honestly, people here are so kind and so beautiful. I don't get the reputation thing. I
don't either. I have family that live there. It's a great state to visit. It's beautiful. The people are fine. Yeah. So.
Oh, I did so well on Fun and Games.
Yeah, Karla, you really knocked it out of the park there. It looks like you were 2 for 8, so it looks like you're going to have to move around the country again and learn everything there is to know about that state you're living in.
Guess so. Okay. Well, I'm going to pay more attention now.
Yes, we all should.
Thank you.
Paying attention. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on love and, of course, the podcast Modern Love. I appreciate your time, Karla.
It was such a fun time. Thank you.
I want to go to Wyoming. I want to go to Idaho. I want to visit Montana. You know, Indiana, where I live, is the Montana of the East, says no one. I have wildlife here. I've seen squirrels, believe it or not, sometimes wild dogs. And by wild dogs, I just mean my own pet who I let outside and chase a skunk. If there's no wildlife here, please, someone fly me out to the Great West for an interview. We can sit down, we can talk about a podcast, and then we can go out and look for grizzly bears in the wild. That'd be fun. What am I even talking about? We only have 10 more seconds left in this episode. What am I going to say to you? I'm going to say thank you. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time on
Podfulness.